The streetwear world is a crowded space. Countless brands blow up off one moment, then fade because there's no real foundation. But tucked away on the corner of Mulberry Street in Soho sits something genuinely different. We're talking about Noah, housed in an unassuming bungalow at number 195. This isn't just another clothing brand fighting for shelf space and Instagram likes. No, its founder calls it something much more provocative, a weapon of war. So what exactly does that mean? How did Brendon, a skater kid from Long Island who spent over a decade directing the creative vision at Supreme, build something that deliberately stands against many of the industry practices that turn his former employer into a billion-dollar powerhouse? A lot of brand owners hit this wall. Your product is solid, your visuals are sharp, you've got some traction, but the engagement still feels shallow. You start worrying, are these followers really here for us or just for the aesthetic? What Noah New York did right, and what you need to borrow, is that they didn't just chase engagement, they built belief. Their brand voice didn't come from trying to sound like other streetwear brands. It came from Brendon's personal values. Noah speaks like a person, not a company. It takes a stance, and when a brand takes a stance, something beautiful happens. People either align or move on, but the ones who stay for good. That's what you should want for your company, and this is the reason why we're talking about this story today. Instead of trying to get everyone to like you, you need to start speaking with conviction, clear opinions, real language, and no fluff. Let people feel where you stand. So you can't really understand Noah without first getting to know the man behind the brand. Brendon didn't graduate fashion school or climb the corporate ladder. His path was much more organic. His life experiences naturally steered him towards creating clothes. Brendon, growing up in Long Island, his childhood was defined by an interesting duality. He spent his time skating and surfing with friends he described as the weirdo kids, but he also played traditional sports in high school alongside classmates. This blend of experiences would eventually inform Noah's unique aesthetic, somehow appealing equally to hardcore skaters and preppy sailing supporters without feeling forced or fake. Because the Long Island of Brendon's youth wasn't the glamorous Hamptons you might think. He lived in what he called the everything in between, meaning that overlooked stretch of a suburb area, sandwiched between New York City and the wealthy beach communities. His house was visible from Sunrise Highway, sitting behind a used car lot on a service road. Not exactly the privileged upbringing you might expect from someone who would later shape influential fashion brands, but here we are. His story starts just like some of the big names of the hypebeast world, with skateboards. He was riding them since way back in 1976. Now, this wasn't the polished, ESPN-friendly version of skating we now know as today. We talking about old school equipment, Logan Earth ski skateboards, Road Runners, two wheels, ATS skateboard trucks, real pioneering day stuff. By the time he was 13, he was working at Rick's Surf Shop, where he immersed himself in the community, meeting fellow skaters and surfers. There, his real education, style, counterculture, and community began starting to shape his voice and even his own identity. For teenage Brendon, clothing wasn't simply about covering your body. At 13, what you wear carried real weight. It's one of those few ways you can express your identity when you're still figuring out how to articulate who you are and what you believe in. But what made him stand out early on was his remarkable indifference to conformity. While many teenagers are desperate to blend in, he simply wasn't bothered about matching his peer groups or his style expectations. If he felt like wearing a pink floral shirt as a 13-year-old boy in the late 70s, he would wear it without hesitation. Social consequences be damned, he don't care. This stubborn independence would eventually become the philosophical foundation of Noah. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. By the early 1990s, Brendon was still figuring out his path when an opportunity came up. He moved to Miami to work with his friend Don on a clothing brand called Pervert. This became his first real introduction to the business side of fashion, but New York's gravitational pull proved too strong, and in 1996, just 2 years after James founded Supreme, Brendon returned north, enjoying what was then just a small skateboard shop with big potential. The connection happened through Jebbia's then girlfriend, who heard through grapevine that Brendon was heading back to New York from Miami. Jebbia's brother Dan, who happened to be in Florida at the time, suggested the introduction. When they finally connected, Brendon didn't play it cool or modest. He saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and jumped on it, telling James with perhaps more confidence than expertise that he could handle whatever whatever was needed for the job. Looking back now, he later admitted that he may have oversold his capabilities just a bit. Sometimes that's what getting your foot in the door requires. Supreme was operational, but still small when Brendon joined, carrying various brands alongside its own modest lines of hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and occasional jackets. James had ambitions to grow it and brought Brendon in as a dedicated helper to make that actually happen. At the time, he wasn't entirely sure he could deliver what was needed, but he was determined to figure it all out as they went along. That willingness to dive in and learn on the fly would serve him well. If you asked him about his role during those early Supreme days, he would be low-key with it from the interviews that I saw. He resists calling what he did designing in any formal sense. Instead, he described his work as doing whatever was necessary, meaning hunting down factories, fabric suppliers, finding manufacturing partners willing to work with a small unknown brand, and generally solving problems as they arose. His approach wasn't systematic or academic. It was improvisational, practical, and just deeply do-it-yourself. What's clear is that this wasn't some glamorous fashion job with a corner office. Supreme in 1996 was still a small operation primarily serving New York skaters, who Brendon notes were fundamentally different from their West Coast counterparts, which is key. I know skating can be a niche, but between the West and the East Coast is two distinctly different type of niches, and these dudes was able to do the research and just double down to really be able to target the audience that they specifically wanted. California skateboarding had stronger connections to surf culture, brighter colors, beach aesthetics, a certain sun-drenched type of vibe. New York skate culture was more grittier, more urban, more hardened by the city environment. Over the next 15 years, minus a short break we'll talk about in a bit, Brendon played a huge role in turning Supreme from a local skate shop into a global cultural icon. The brand was way ahead of the curve, launching the whole drop model before it became a thing, with limited releases that had been lining people up around the block and flipping products for crazy prices. Even though Brendon tends to brush off the credit, people in the industry say he was a key force behind the look and vibe that made Supreme legendary. He started with commitment. When he joined Supreme, he wasn't some expert with a blueprint. He was just a guy willing to solve one problem at a time. And if you're trying to build a core audience that actually rides for your brand, that same mentality applies. Most of your people won't connect to you because you have everything perfect and connected and all figured out. They'll connect with you because they see what you stand on. Real quick, if you're a brand owner with a solid product but your engagement's been quiet between drops, during drops, or even after, we've been building something behind the scenes that's made to help. I'm opening a private engagement service for brands that want real momentum. More eyes on your page, more comments from people who actually care. No shortcuts, just real traffic built the right way with the right people finding you for the right reasons. We're only accepting 4 brands per quarter, so if you're serious about keeping your brand in motion throughout the year, tap the link in the description and apply now. Brendon wasn't trying to sound like a polished brand. He was moving with intention, doing the gritty work and shaping the voice of Supreme by staying rooted in the culture they came from. That authenticity, that's what brands and people are remembered by. From showing up, doing the unscalable things, and letting your audience feel the process. Supreme's voice didn't come from a deck or a mood board. It came from years of trial, error, listening, and staying real with a very specific group of people. If you're not sure how to get your audience to stick, start by asking, what does my brand actually do for them outside of selling product? Are you giving them something to believe in? Something to be part of? Because once people see themselves in your voice, they don't just follow, they ride. Brendon spent about 14 to 15 years at Supreme, split into 2 stints of roughly 7 or 8 years each. During that time, he had a front row seat as skateboarding and street culture went from underground scene to full-blown mainstream obsessions fueling billion-dollar industries. Like when he first joined in 96, Supreme was genuinely small, just a cool skate shop growing bit by bit each year, but you could feel something bigger bubbling up as the years went on. These once tight-knit subcultures with their own rules, styles, and vibes were starting to get noticed by the outside world. And instead of just changing them outright, the mainstream kind of swallowed them up, taking their look, their slang, their energy, and turned it into something way more marketable. And what started as a niche, almost secret communities ended up becoming big business. The clothes, the sneakers, and the music that once belonged to insiders only were now everywhere. On runways, runways and ads, malls, with all the perks and trade-offs that came along with being mainstream. So back in 2002, while still working at Supreme, Brendon decided to try something of his own. He launched Noah, a brand that would later become his main focus. But that first run didn't last too long, because by 2006 he had to shut it down, and he went back to Supreme as a full-time design director. He's pretty open about how things went. He says that the first version of Noah was a mess. It didn't have enough funding, it had organizational problems, it just wasn't set up to succeed. Still, people got what he was trying to do. Even with all the behind the scenes struggles, the brand still struck a chord. It wasn't so much a failure as a crash course in what it really takes to build something independent. For the next few years, Brendon kept doing what he did best, shaping Supreme's creative vision and helping steer it into the powerhouse it eventually became and what we all know it as. But behind the scenes, something was starting to shift. As Supreme and streetwear as a whole started to blow up and start to gain the recognition it deserved commercially, he started to question his place in all of it. He still believed in the culture he grew up with. The problem wasn't that it had gone mainstream. It was that the version of it now, driving massive sales and global trends, felt miles away from that raw, real spirit that made it special to begin with. More and more, he found himself drifting from the hype machine and reconnecting with the deeper reasons he fell in love with the scene in the first place. Finally, in 2015, Brendon made the call to leave Supreme for the second time, but this time he had a real plan. He and his wife, who was an interior designer, brought Noah back to life, only now with a much clearer sense of purpose and direction. This wasn't just a second shot with a bigger budget. He grew both as a person and as a creative. In the years since Noah's first run, he gained a deeper understanding of business, capitalism, the environment, and more importantly, his own values. That experience shaped the way he and his wife approached this new version of Noah, which was more focused, more intentional, and way more thoughtful. The rebooted Noah still had its signature look: rugby shirts, swole trousers, and that nautical prep vibe, but now every design choice came with a bigger mission behind it. Doing good wasn't some marketing spin, it was built into the brand DNA. Of course, doing good can sound like one of those vague, feel-good buzz type of words, but for Noah, it meant taking real, concrete steps, starting with how and where the clothes was made. They only worked with factories that met ethical standards and paid living wages. Most of these production happened in places like Canada, Portugal, Italy, and Japan, countries with solid labor protections. They're also super intentional about the materials they use, prioritizing natural, long-lasting fabrics. That approach makes their stuff more expensive, and of course some customers complain about the prices, but Brendon does not apologize for it. In fact, he uses it as a teaching moment. These cheap clothes often come at a hidden cost, paid by underpaid workers living in tough conditions with limited opportunity. That kind of pricing, he argues, is dishonest. Noah's higher price tags, he says, are just the real cost of doing things the right way. More importantly, they have literally offered full refunds to customers who were upset about Noah's political stances. Here's the real shift: your community won't deepen through product posts alone. Look at Noah's captions, look at his newsletters, or even his Instagram. They're not selling, they're building context. That context makes the product mean something. If you want deeper engagement, you need to start writing and speaking in a way that connects your product to your worldview. That might mean talking about why you chose a certain or particular material, what you think about overproduction, or even why you built your brand in the first place. Don't just post products, post point of view. If someone scrolls through your feed, it should leave understanding not just what you sell, but who you are. That's how you stop people from just watching and start getting them to ride with you. When it comes to design, one of the most unique things about Noah is that it just doesn't fit into any one box. Somehow, the brand speaks to skaters, surfers, prep school grads, and city kids that's into streetwear. All groups that usually wouldn't shop in the same store, let alone wear the same clothes. He himself calls Noah a weird gumbo of influences. It blends skate culture, politics, music, and environmentalism into a brand that doesn't try to be one thing. It just reflects who he is. He's not out to build something that only appeals to one tight, curated crowd. Instead, this is because he's growing at a rapid pace. His thinking is, here's everything I care about. Some part of it will probably speak to you too, and it works. That openness builds a community that's more layered and more inclusive. That philosophy shows up in the clothes. One Noah tee might have a kind of creepy looking pelican on it, oddly intense. Another might just say Long Island, which for Brendon isn't about being trendy. It's about repping where he's from unapologetically. The point isn't to create a perfectly polished fashion editor approved look. It's to make things that feel honest and real even if they don't follow a strict aesthetic rulebook. They know it's a balancing act. He's fully aware that if Noah leans too hard into the messaging without also keeping it fun, relatable, and creatively fresh, it'll come off as preachy or forced. That's why they put as much energy into the cool graphics, playful designs, and staying connected to real culture like skating and music as they do into talking about values. For Noah, it's all about finding that sweet spot between meaning and style. Look at the bigger picture and you'll notice that the same vibe carries over into their physical space. The store on Mulberry Street, which you can see here, is designed by Brendon's wife. Feels more like a cozy, thoughtfully decorated hangout than a fashion boutique. Picture a treehouse meets a living room setup, complete with a comfy leather club couch and carefully chosen details that make you want to stay a while. It's warm, welcoming, and definitely not about rushing people through the checkout line. It couldn't be more different from Supreme's stark gallery-style shops with lines around the block and security guards at the door. And that's the whole point. Noah was never meant to be Supreme 2.0. It's its own thing with a totally different energy and mission. This brings me to a wonderful point: the difference between fashion and style. See, at the core of Noah's philosophy is a distinction that Brendon sees as absolutely essential. There's a stark difference between fashion and style. He finds it kind of odd how fashion has become its own standalone hobby. Like, just buying clothes and putting them on has turned into this whole activity. For him, that felt backwards. Growing up, style wasn't something you chased. It just happened. It came out of who you were, what you loved doing, and the community you were a part of. Real style starts with living. It's not about copying the latest trend or getting your hands on the most hyped piece. It's about knowing who you are and letting that show through what you wear. He's constantly reminding people your life comes first. The clothes should then follow. Like, imagine two people wearing the exact same thing. You could say a basic white tee and blue jeans. One might look effortlessly cool, like someone straight out of a movie or a zine. The other, forgettable. You wouldn't even probably recognize them. The difference isn't the outfit, it's the person. It's how they move, how they carry themselves, the confidence and energy they bring. That same mindset shapes how Noah operates as a brand. Unlike Supreme, where Brendon helped develop the whole drop culture of limited releases and resale hype, Noah goes in a different direction. They still release stuff on a regular, but without all the smoke and mirrors. No fake scarcity, no panic buying, no games. Here's what I need you to catch. What Brendon's saying is simple but heavy. Style isn't the starting point, it's the result. And if you're running a brand, this applies to you more than just the clothes. It applies to your identity, your voice, your entire presence online and in person. Too many brands are trying to look the part before actually living it. You're probably chasing aesthetics, tweaking mood boards, stressing over what your feed looks like, but none of that matters if your audience can feel who you are underneath that. Brendon actually lives this philosophy. The people who work at Noah aren't just into fashion, they're into life. They skate, they surf, they run, birdwatch, paint, do yoga, and many other things. It's not a branding stunt, it's just who they are in general. And that lived experience gives Noah a kind of credibility you can't fake. It's not trying to be cool or forced. It is what it is. And that brings us naturally to 2018. By this point, Brendon had sharpened his mission to something much bigger than just making cool clothes. In an interview that year, he said that Noah is as much of a weapon of war as a business. It sounds dramatic, but once you understand where he's coming from, it actually makes a lot of sense. Brendon isn't just designing tees and hoodies. He's trying to push back against what he sees as the ugliest part of the system he's working with. Think overconsumption, the fast fashion hamster wheel that encourages people to keep buying stuff they do not need. He sees it as a kind of modern horror show, and what scares him the most is how disconnected and distracted young people can be from it all. The irony he points out is that a lot of people think they're being rebellious by buying into streetwear culture or alternative fashion, when in reality they're just feeding themselves the same system. They are unintentionally helping the very structures that harm the planet and exploit people. That's what Noah is really fighting against. Sure, it's a clothing brand, but it's also his way of saying, look, we're not powerless. We could build things differently. And Noah still operates in the world of capitalism because, well, how can't you? But it tries to push back from the inside by being transparent, ethical, and intentional. Success isn't just about sales, even if that means growing slower or making less money. Because to him, inside his own words, like, what's the point of building a business if it just adds to the damage. It all circles back to that core belief he holds. Your style should come from how you live and your choices. It can also reflect your values. Even as a consumer, your style is supposed to reflect your values. Noah is just one example of what that can look like in action. And of course, building something different, something that doesn't play by the usual fashion rules, come with its own set of headaches. His vision might be bold and refreshingly honest, but that doesn't mean everyone gets it. Noah is still relatively small compared to the big players, even if it means not every item says made in USA. At the heart of it all is that constant push and pull. How do you stay true to your values and grow in a system that rewards cutting corners? Noah's answer so far has been to accept the tension, stay small by design, and grow carefully without it compromising what they actually stand for. Again, he ain't trying to build the next Supreme. He's not chasing headlines. He's playing a long game. It's hope that as hype culture starts to burn out, more people will gravitate towards brands that are transparent, intentional, and grounded in something real. And when that shift happens, Noah will already be there, steady, consistent, and still doing it their way. Just to mention like more recent years, Brendon got an unexpected opportunity, which was to be the creative director of J.Crew menswear line. At first, it seemed like a strange fit to a lot of people. Him with the skate culture roots from Supreme and his outspoken, politically charged brand Noah taking over some preppy, mall-based brand that was struggling with its identity after years of losing relevance. And this happened. One of his first big moves was reintroducing the giant fit chino, which was this loose 90s inspired silhouette pulled straight from the archives. And to everyone's surprise, it became a hit. It drew in a whole new generation of young guys who had written off J.Crew as their parents' brand. This was a bold but simple choice that showed he really gets how fashion works in cycles and how authenticity can often have more impact than trying to be the next big thing. At J.Crew, Brendon applies the same principle he used at Noah, no style over chasing trends. He's quick to acknowledge the solid foundation laid by the team before him, and rather than pushing for some radical overhaul, he focuses on reinforcing the brand's authentic identity while keeping an eye on what's next. This balance of respecting the past and moving forward is what makes his approach so successful. So the lesson here, once more, is to trust your instincts and stay true to your beliefs and prioritize integrity over growth at any cost. I mean, if you want to be here for the long run, this is the method you should take. And if you're just here to make like a quick cash out type of grab, by all means go ahead and do what's trendy and what's working for the moment. He tells young creatives to ignore outside pressures and doubts and follow what they believe in, even if it goes against the grain. But don't take my word for it. A few years back, right, Brendon took some time to chat directly with fans on Reddit in an Ask Me Anything session. No filters, just him answering questions. And I'm showing a picture right now as we speak on the screen, so you get a real sense of how he thinks, not the polished stuff you hear inside interviews. If you look at the combo, someone asked him how he got started in business and what advice he gave to young entrepreneurs. What's cool about his answer is that it totally shatters the typical fashion career story. He didn't go to the design school or have all these connections. He just started working in something he loved and let the culture around it drive everything. Instead of obsessing over clothes first, he says start with the culture, what actually inspires you. Here's another one. They said it's truly inspiring the work he's done at Noah. They recently listened to an interview with Chris Gentile, owner of Pilgrim Surf Supply. He talked about how for many years he was reluctant to bring his interests of art, music, style, and surfing under one roof. Once he did it, it became this uniqueness of Pilgrim and what makes that place special. But his question to Noah was, did you have any apprehensions of combining all these things that Noah New York stands for together? Or did it always make sense for him to combine these different interests into one? And Brendon said not at all. It made absolute sense in order for him to build Noah in an honest way. The business isn't just a business. He said it's our life. And with that in mind, our interests cannot be separated from the business. There would be no Noah without all the things we love. And I think that's the biggest lesson you guys could take here. Authenticity, your own value, things that you love when you was a child and as you grew up, beats everything above all. Business is an extension of your life rather than separate from it. And the courage to follow your own path regardless of industry, conventions, or category expectations, that's how you find your way inside this world. And by the way, if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Alright y'all, this is Lee from North Studios. I hope you guys all have a blessed day. Till next time, I'm out of here.